Ready to talk property the Aussie way? Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Property NXT Talks. I'm Cilla.
I'm Luke.
And you're here to hear all about property investing chat that Luke and I love to have a little banter on. Well, actually, first before we get started, NRL or AFL, Luke? And for those that don't know, NRL is rugby league and AFL is Australian Football League. Two very, very different sports, but there's two big cities in Australia that are quite divisive on which ones they follow. So I wanted to know, Luke, what's your sport?
I'm a sports mad, Aussie, so I love them both. I'd probably rugby league if I didn't have a son, but my son is more into AFL, so I'm watching a lot more AFL recently. And because I'm a Sydney boy, I follow the Swans. I'm a Manly boy. I grew up in Manly, so probably the Manly Seagulls. But I've got a bit of a connection with a few other teams through friends, and my brother works in the NRL, so I follow a few different teams. And I used to live in Melbourne when I was younger, so I used to go for Hawthorn in Melbourne, and my brother went for Geelong. And that was back in the day when anyone who's from Melbourne will know there's Gary Ablett and Jason Dunstall, and there was just a golden era for those two teams.
Don't know who they are.
No, you don't.
I'm
But
sure.
Anyway, I just thought, you asked me the question.
No,
You'll soon get that I'm a sports mad person when I start talking about sport. I just love it. So, yeah, I could watch either.
Yeah. I actually find, so being a Sydney girl myself as well, grew up surrounded by NRL. It's just sort of the sport that everyone follows in Sydney. And Manly Seagulls, because I'm from the Northern Beaches. That was more by default. Jamie goes for St. George, so completely different area. But I find being up here in Singapore over the last 10 years, we've sort of switched to AFL. Like, it's just a bit more of a following maybe. Maybe we're more friends with people from Melbourne, but I think we just have been getting into AFL recently. So again, our sons are the same. They've sort of just enjoyed AFL a little bit more than I think if we were raising them back in Sydney, it would be a bit of a different story.
I think the kids see the AFL as they see the long kicks, the running. There is collisions. Like rugby league, it's all collisions because it's a much smaller field and they just are going at it. But in AFL, you've got the sprinting, the handballing, the kicks, the goals. So I see why kids
it's
like it.
It's a bit more entertaining, really.
I think potentially,
there's some excitement there.
Yeah. But if there's a game on, I'll be watching.
Yeah. I'm a Cats supporter too. I know I should be a Sydney Swans supporter, but I got introduced to AFL through my sister-in-law and husband who live in Melbourne, and they were Geelong Cats, and that's how I sort of got to know the game. So they're my team, even though I should probably.
You've had a golden era. They've been amazing for years.
Yes, they have. I chose the right team.
Yes, you did.
So the reason we're talking about these two sports is because they hone from two different, they've got two big capital cities, the two biggest ones in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne. Like we said before, we're Sydney people, but a lot of investors look to Melbourne or Sydney to invest. And I think what I wanted to ask Luke today and what we wanted to unpack a bit was, which one would you invest in? Price point, we could talk about, growth, we could talk about lifestyle. I think there's just a lot to think about when you think about two of Australia's largest capital cities and which one you should invest in.
Well, I think, what a topic, Melbourne and Sydney. So, for people that have never been there, my takeaway is Sydney's all about the beaches. So Sydney City is beautiful, but it's not the busiest of cities. Everyone sort of disperses and goes to the beaches in the eastern suburbs, the southern beaches and northern beaches, and they're spectacular places to be. Melbourne, great city, great culture around food, sport. They really follow their sports teams down there more than anywhere else in Australia. All the other major sports are going. And Melbourne's a great city, but Melbourne, you get the cold weather too more, so you can be a bit more fashionable, maybe a bit more fashionable as a city. I don't know. That's a topic for other people.
No, but I think climate is important for some people because they don't mind the cold and they kind of want to have a different climate than what they might be living in overseas.
Yeah, well, Melbourne's famous for 4 seasons in one day. It can be sunny, it can be rain, it can hail the afternoon, and then it's all of a sudden sunny again. But in terms of cities from a real estate perspective, they are ridiculously different at the moment. As of 2025, they're a very different space. But, to go back onto Sydney currently is still the biggest city in Australia in terms of population. And Melbourne is very, very close. They're probably level pegging. I think somewhere around 6.5 million in each city or something like that. Someone will know the stats better than me. But Melbourne is on track to become the biggest city in terms of numbers. in the coming years, and they're on track for 8 million people. And a lot of that is to do with geography. So people that don't understand the different geographies of Sydney and Melbourne, Sydney's surrounded by harbours. So on the northern side, you've got Pittwater. On the southern side, you've got Port Phillip Bay, and through the middle, obviously, Sydney Harbour. And at the back of it, you've got the Blue Mountains. And so that's quite restrictive in terms of its growth.
Yeah, it
either
tends,
way
and
in
tends
and
to
out.
follow the coast.
So Sydney's becoming a up. So they're going to go up to grow. So they've got to look at different reasons and different ways to grow the place. And whereas Melbourne has land as far as the eye can see, east, west, north, nothing south because obviously it's water. And Melbourne is growing, out.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And it's a sort of house and land capital of Australia. They've got house and lands as far as the eye can see. So Melbourne will become the biggest city, and in terms of immigration numbers, most of the new migrants come into Sydney and Melbourne, and that's because of jobs primarily.
Yeah.
They're two big cities.
The big company headquarters.
Big
are in
company
those too.
headquarters.
There's more and more coming up in Melbourne though. It used to be Sydney majority, but there's just more and more headquarters opening up.
And a lot are now moving up to Brisbane,
Yeah,
which is
that's
becoming
true.
a huge city. It already was a big city, but becoming an even playing field with the other two. Now, Melbourne, I think, I've always had a funny thing about Melbourne in terms of, I think they've got really good marketing overseas. Like I see online, they've always got, second best
Melbourne.
place in the world to live, or the best place in the world to live. I think it's Melbourne publications interviewing people from Melbourne and then publicising it. I mean, I don't really know who else is saying that. It's a great city, but there's a lot of amazing cities in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Melbourne's the best at all these things. But, like Sydney and Melbourne, price-wise, though, now there's a gulf between them both. So Sydney real estate is the top echelon of Australian real estate in terms of values, and Melbourne's now the fourth or fifth most expensive in terms of per capita price point. And what does that mean? I think the average house price, this is dwelling price, I should say, is about 1.5 million in Sydney. And in Melbourne, I think it's about sort of 850, 900,000.
Okay.
And in between there is Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide and Canberra to a degree ahead of Melbourne. Melbourne's had a really tough time since COVID and their property market's been fairly flat. But what does that mean? It can lead to opportunity because as a second biggest city, soon to be the biggest in terms of migration, what does that mean? People coming in, they need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
Price point's really cheap. We think Melbourne's a pretty good place to look at soon, but two amazing cities. I mean, what's your take?
The way I look at sometimes explain Sydney versus Melbourne, I probably look at it more about lifestyle experience. Sydney is, it was the first place that Captain Cook came and sort of said, here is where we're going to start, essentially. And they started to build out from there. And therefore, it's a bit of an unplanned city. It's kind of like they did a bit here, they've done a bit here, they've done a bit here. So transport and getting around the city in and out isn't always very smooth.
It's a nightmare.
It's like, and I think that's something they're trying to improve, but it costs money and it takes time. And we know that labour is a big issue in Australia. But Melbourne, they've built it on blocks. It's very planned. They've got traffic management traffic lights where it's like when you're driving home, they'll control the traffic, so there's merging that happens very seamlessly. They've got the trams, they've got trains, and I just think their transport is better. But I am a beach girl, I'm a nature girl. I'm not saying Melbourne doesn't have it, but I do think the climate in Sydney is warmer. It's more sort of favourable to being outdoors. And so that's how I look at it. And I think, you sort of look at Sydney and go, it's really expensive to get in. It's crazy. I'm living away for 10 years and now, we just like to always look at the house prices back home and it's just crazy to think of what you're spending for a street that you used to sort of live on and you're like, that value is crazy. And it's like, if only I bought a house 10 years ago. But anyway, that's just the story.
Just a quick fun fact about Melbourne driving for those who are from Melbourne. Hopefully they get a laugh over this and people that don't know. In Melbourne City, in Melbourne CBD, to turn right...
Oh, yes, the tram. Yeah.
You actually turn right from the far left lane and you wait all the way over on the left lane until it's basically gone red. And as it goes red, you cut across absolutely everybody and turn right. It's the strangest quirk.
Yeah.
And it's the only place in the world I've seen that. It's only in the city. And if you've got a hire car, I mean, good luck.
Yeah,
You'd be like, I'm on the far right lane about to turn right. And you're like, why is everyone sitting in the far left lane? banked up with their indicators on to turn right, just waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever driven around Melbourne City. I think that would just be.
It's fun.
Intimidating.
It's fun, but it's, because it's such a unique thing. I've never seen it anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love going to Melbourne. Like I said, I've got nieces and nephews that live in that area, and we used to go down quite a bit when we lived in Australia. And it is very like European vibes, like the cafes and the art and the culture. It's just, going down to St Kilda on the Sunday, like it's a really nice vibe. But I think for me, the sort of suburbs around Sydney where we live is sort of where
it's hard to beat.
Yeah,
hard
a bit
to beat.
biased though, I feel
But
like.
price points, so we can give people a bit of a guide. If you want to live in the inner city of Sydney, as an example, you take the what we call the lower North Shore, inner west, eastern suburbs. Just say a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1-car new build apartment. You're looking anywhere from 1.8 to 3.5 million dollars for a 2-bedroom apartment in a really nice block, great position, which is expensive. You'd rent that out for not great return. We talked about this in another episode, but you'll generally get really good capital growth on that asset over time. And then on the outskirts of that, and we've talked about this a lot ourselves, to buy a house to live in, like an existing house, you can't get much for under $3 million nowadays, probably in the inner west.
Yeah.
You're looking more consistently $4 million and above for a home. In the upper parts of the northern beaches, you can get things probably 2.5 to 3. And the southern beaches, etc., and further south. But, even then you're spending an hour in the car to get to work if you had to work in the city, or by public transport. It's very spread out. And then you compare that to Melbourne. We've recently done a bit of work with a new development partner in Melbourne. We really like their business model, and they've got a new development in right near St Kilda, and a 2-bed, 2-bath, 1 parking. So very comparable to what you get in Sydney, same distance from the CBD. You'll get a really beautiful product for about 1.4 million. So it's almost, half of what the upper echelon is. Not quite. So say, if you say you're paying 2.5 in Sydney and 1.5 in Melbourne, it's a huge difference of that $1 million saving. And then to buy a house in really good parts of Melbourne, there's some really amazing suburbs in Melbourne, which we won't talk about, but it's very expensive, like Sydney. Mm-hmm. But then the general suburbs, you're looking at anywhere from, again, really close to the city, $3 million to get you a really nice house. But on the benefit for investors on the outskirts of Melbourne, in sort of that 30-minute rim where they're building a lot of properties, you can buy a house and land for $650,000. So that's a dramatic drop-off. And that's been built for a growing population. And so the opportunity there is you just can't get that sort of price point in Sydney. Sydney, on the outskirts of Sydney, you're still looking $1 million plus, really. So for really good entry-level, great properties where you'll get an endless supply of people that can rent it, you get a really good opportunity from a price point down in Melbourne.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it comes down to as well what you always say, what's your reason to buy? Is it for personal or is it for, investment reasons? As well, another thing why I think Melbourne becomes sort of a default city is there's universities like Monash that are up here and have got quite a reputation in Singapore and probably other cities in Asia that international students do go to. And so that's, that's Melbourne. So I think that's just something else that sort of university, international students going there that makes it also a bit of a, not blind spot, that's not what I'm trying to say, like a tunnel vision. It's just like zeroing in and it must be that city.
Yeah, and I think for our foreign listeners, any foreign buyers out there listening that want to look at real estate, the challenge with the Melbourne market versus the other parts of Australia is they've got quite a heavy tax on foreign investment. From a land tax standpoint, it's what's called an absentee owner tax. To give a stat, if you bought a house on the outskirts of Melbourne for $680,000, an Australian buying it as an investment will pay about $1,200 in land tax a year, which is still a lot, if you've just got that style asset. A foreign investor will pay $15,000 a year.
Yeah, okay.
Now, that's over half of your rental returns going to a tax that's so to buy in Melbourne as a foreigner, you've got to have other reasons to buy. And if it is for university, great property for someone to live in, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's not. I would look in other states. Say for example,
Where would you look? Yeah.
Well, Queensland or Perth. We love that Brisbane market. That's a great place to look at.
Good universities there too.
Great universities.
Great
There's great universities all over Australia. Canberra's got amazing universities, ACTU, etc. So there's great opportunities. It's just our philosophy at Property Next is let's challenge you on the reasons why you would want to buy somewhere. And there is a perception that Melbourne is a place to go, but in the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a fairly flat market. And I think there's an opportunity coming for Melbourne, but as a foreigner, you'd want to look elsewhere because of the absentee owner tax, which is quite dramatic. It really makes you basically have to pay for your whole mortgage up front if you are getting a mortgage on the property.
I wonder if, because Sydney and Melbourne have both had the Olympics as well, and Brisbane is now getting the Olympics. They are significant. It's a significant world event that will put Brisbane on the world map. I'd be curious to see if Brisbane becomes sort of another city to watch in terms of the places to be and live, not just in Australia but globally as well.
Well, they got to do it well. Fingers crossed.
I know, a lot of pressure.
Can they deliver the infrastructure? Can they put on an amazing games? And I think Australians in general love sport, and we know that the country, the state, and the country will get behind it. There'll be packed crowds, so they've just got to do that right, and that market will, it's already exploded, and we think it will continue to. But from the 2032 Olympics and beyond, it'll be on the world map, as you say, and that's going to be an amazing place to own real estate.
And we've talked about buying in Sydney and Melbourne. What about selling? Is there trade-offs or pros and cons for selling in Melbourne, selling in Sydney, or is it the same?
So Sydney and Melbourne are home of the auction. They love auctions in Sydney and Melbourne, and for people outside of Australia or outside of those two states, they do auctions in other parts of Australia, but Melbourne's famous for its street auctions. You've got a property on the market, you all stand out there and you do open bidding. It's a great way to buy real estate. Very stressful for the owner, stressful for the buyers because it's open competition. And Sydney's very similar, and they also do a thing called in-rooms auctions. But auction selling makes it quite difficult for buyers because they don't actually know what anything's worth. You've sort of got to believe the agent. But the markets are hugely popular. If you talk about there's a severe lack of supply at the moment, there's a huge amount of buyers that want to buy property. So if you're priced right, I always say when you're selling any property, there's really only two reasons someone's not going to buy it. It's falling down, or you've hidden issues that a building inspector's picked up. And really the main issue is it's overpriced. Mm-hmm. So if you're open to getting really good advice from a real estate agent, there's some fabulous real estate agents in Australia who are brilliant at what they do. Listen to the agent, listen to the price points, listen to the buyers, and you'll get a pretty good understanding as to what your price point is, and then it's up to you to then sell. But selling's a really easy thing.
Yeah, and there's not really a big difference between either of them, because I think what we talked price point was a little bit different, right? So it's 800 to 900k median for dwelling prices in Melbourne, but buying in Sydney is higher. So there's a difference there in buying, but for selling, it's pretty much like for like. Both auction markets.
Doesn't matter. They're busy markets. There's heaps of people that want to buy in them. It's price point related in both in all markets. Is price point related. My guidance is, as an old real estate agent, listen to the agent that you've appointed, because the real estate agent actually doesn't get paid until they sell a property. So it's one of those great things where you get to employ somebody, they do a job for you, and you don't actually pay them until later on if they've done it successfully. Yeah. So use the agent. They're really good at what they do. Find them, and I know lots. So if someone's up here and they don't have someone that they know or they're comfortable with, you can ask me. I know lots all over the country. We can find someone that'll work out for you.
Excellent. So Sydney or Melbourne, I guess again it depends on what you're looking for. Have a chat to us and we can help guide you through comparing those two cities, and we do have products available in both that we could talk to you through as well. I think for us it's like, yes, Sydney and Melbourne are great cities, but we also encourage you to stay open to other capital cities in the country as well, especially if investment and building that property portfolio is a big goal for you. I think that's it. That's the wrap up.
Which one has the best croissants? Or coffee.
I
Coffee
would-
culture in
Melbourne-
Australia is huge.
I don't think it matters. I think it's about the barista and the coffee beans. So
Yes.
I will actually this is a big digress. I will actually go to a cafe based on what their coffee bean is. So if it's all press, Campos, like this is how I look for coffee.
You don't look for the hipster coffee maker?
No, I don't look
like
for
if
the
they've got
barista.
the baggy jeans
I look for the coffee
or
bean.
they've got that look about them that
Yeah,
they've been
yeah.
standing next to a coffee machine too long, then you know it's going to be a good coffee.
Well, I guess if you go, you sort of, because they'll have the signs of what coffee it is outside, and then you go in to order, and then you can gauge like, oh, this is going to be a good one. I'm not sure. But what I love about baristas in Melbourne and Sydney is like it's quite a respected job to have. It's an art form.
Yeah.
Like being a barista is very cool. It's like and there's a lot of
coffee's cheap
responsibility
in
to make
Australia.
good coffee for people.
Do you think coffee's cheap in Australia? I do. We buy
Compared to here, yeah, for sure.
We go out of our way when we're home to buy a lot of coffee at restaurants because it's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, it's anywhere from $4 still Aussie, up to
Aussie.
sort of like it's extortionate if it's like $5.50.
Yeah,
You
it
know.
is.
It's just, and what are we paying up here? $7, $8,
Yeah.
sometimes $9.
Yeah, because it's all plus and then $7 and yep. Yes,
Okay,
I'm
off
definitely a
coffee.
coffee as well. But I think
We love
Sydney
both
or Melbourne,
cities. I love
we
both
them
cities. You love both cities, and we love them for different reasons. The other one I always talk about is I'm a mad horse racing guy, and I love Melbourne and Sydney for the horse racing.
Randwick and Flemington.
Randwick and Flemington. It's just they're both brilliant cities, and I don't think you can go wrong in either. But there is a really dramatic price difference at the moment between the two cities. So budget's got to come into it if you are looking. And within what location within those cities are you looking to buy? They're really fun, exciting conversations to have.
Yeah,
and I think you can't go wrong, really. But there are other great places in Australia to buy. So, it's a sort of world is your oyster thing, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So have a chat to us today. Property Next. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.